Hey everyone, welcome to SDRescue. I'm joined once again this week by Grayson Fulbright, and today we're going to be looking at real cold email that has been sent to me. And let me tell you, this week it's really close. Like, this was one of the best cold emails that I've received in a long time that I didn't reply to. Definitely top 3 this year that didn't get a reply. So hopefully with Grayson's help and a little bit of discussion, we can get this to a place where it's replyable. And we just hope to increase and improve your outreach and get you guys better results. Don't forget, if you want us to take a look at your email, connect with me and Grayson on LinkedIn, follow SD Revolution, send us your cold emails. We'll be happy to evaluate it. We'll be happy to give you some coaching. You can even join us on the show if you'd like. Please get in touch with us. We'd love to look at what you guys are working with. But for now, we'll jump right into the email. All right. Hi, Austin. Are you leading a significant organizational change? According to Harvard Business Review, almost 1/3 of U.S. employees don't understand why changes are happening. Some of the reasons why employees resist organizational change are lack of proper communication to present a compelling vision for the future after the change, poor timing for communicating organizational change, lack of continuing two-way communication to understand employee resistance, lack of proper tools that empower leaders and managers to lead through change. Can I show you how we elevate your communication strategy to support change in your organization? Are you available for a quick 15-minute call later this week or next? Here's some good articles that may be of interest to you. An intranet, and then it goes on to list the 3 articles. Okay, so right off the bat, there's a couple of things that I really like about this email. It's one of the only ones that I've received this year that talked about, first off, it asks, are you leading a significant organizational change? And that's contextual to who I am and what I'm doing in my role. Sometimes I am, sometimes I'm not. But if I were, I would at least, it would at least seem tailored to me. And then the other thing that I really like is that it lists off several different problems. This is a good attempt at a problem-centric email. It's not a great attempt, but it's definitely a good one. And this is definitely a step in the right direction from, hi, we're ABC company and we do XYZ for people who who lead organizational changes, and 15-minute phone call, right? So there's a lot of good things in this email, and there's a lot of things that are going for it. What are your thoughts, Grayson?
Yeah, I think I'd agree here. I think what this email does well is structure kind of this presentation that they're making. I think, we talked about priming in a previous episode where really that question is, it's there to kind of catch attention, but it's also there for once people open the email, it helps make everything else more impactful and more relevant. I think they also did a really good job, when we look at the colors on this email. They do a good job of painting this kind of current state of pain versus kind of the expected future state that their target buyer is trying to look for. And I think that they did a good job painting that picture. Overall, I think the email is structured well. It is a little bit long and could have been shortened, but they did a good job of kind of presenting those pains. I think the big miss on my end for this email is that they could have done more to explain why the pain matters. When they talk about the Harvard Business Review stats, that probably caught the attention of some of their readers. And they probably were like, oh, wow, 1/3 of employees don't understand why changes are happening. That's interesting. But then they just kind of keep going on that train of thought without really stopping to explain, here's why this matters to you. Here's why you should keep reading about this. Here's why it's so critical. And so if there's one kind of big picture feedback I could leave here, I might have even removed the additional context that they presented in the bullet points just to make that sentence there to say, I presented the pain, here's why I think you should pay attention to it.
Yeah, and so a couple of things. First off, about the Harvard Business Review link. Now, when I read this email, I skipped the first, I'll be honest, the first time I read through it, I skipped the, are you leading a significant organizational change? And I read that, I missed that line, not sure why, but I missed it. And I read the Harvard Business Review line first. Now, I'm not leading a significant organizational change right this second. I mean, I guess all leaders and especially sales leaders are trying to perform some organizational change on their team, right? To some degree. You're always coaching and trying to get them to do something. Sometimes you're trying to open a new market or do something more significant, but nothing super specific. So but I did see the article and I actually clicked on the article and stopped reading the email. So I think that's a little bit of a danger is for me, I stopped reading the email and clicked on the Harvard Business Review link, but maybe if somebody was in the middle of an organizational change, they would disregard the link. And then they went right into the bulleted list, and I just think it's a little long, and it's about different problems. I actually see this on my team, is that once we start talking about problems, we start empathizing and understanding our customers and what they're going through. And so we don't know exactly what problems they have. So the temptation is to load the email like a shotgun or a black powder muzzle loader rifle with all their problems and then fire it off and hope that one of the 12 bullets we put in there resonates. And I like to, if you're doing something like this and these are pretty focused problems, which is why I liked this email so much, is they seem specific enough. And some of them I've actually seen in orgs I've led, right? I've run into these problems. So I know that they are real and they seem to understand pretty accurately. What I would say is when you're sure you're on good problems and you have good problems, sometimes you're A/B testing and trying to see what people will reply to. But if you know you've got good problems, separate them into different emails. Put them on later in the sequence or find a way to segment your audience on other characteristics that would lead you to believe those sorts of problems. And I believe, and organizational change is going to be difficult to identify externally. So I do understand the temptation here, but I think that's the biggest problem is I got to the bullet points and I'll be honest, I didn't read past the first bullet until I went back to dissect it because they were, first of all, the first bullet was a little too long, but then the other thing is that they didn't seem to connect. And then I saw the 15-minute, hey, do you want a 15-minute call at the end? And I don't know. I'm starting to actually get into the habit of like reading the first little bit of an email, jumping to the bottom to see if the ask is a 15-minute call, and like making my decision on the email off of the first line and the ask. It's an interesting thing, but I read a lot of them, so maybe that's just my fault.
Right. Cool. Yeah, I wanted to kind of walk through your thoughts kind of bit by bit. It seems like you went pretty well through each line of the email. I think the big piece with the question, I think you made a good point there that, you probably ignored or neglected to read that part of the email because it's an like, are you question, kind of like a nerve wracking, like I'm pointing at you. I have something that I want you to answer and I'm putting you on the spot in an email, which kind of triggers that like stranger danger effect that buyers get. And so I think the point with this intro is it's really good to use questions. I use questions often in intros because if it's phrased right, it can allow a lot of people to capture attention and start thinking about themselves. And for those that don't answer the question or answer the question the other way, if you design it right, it can help actually qualify out bad deals. But I think how you phrase it and how universal that answer would be is really what impacts results. So when he goes in and says like, are you leading a significant organizational change? Just going beyond how he phrased the question, which is, are you, kind of like accusatory. I think his wording was a little bit vague and kind of like brought down confidence for someone reading this question, because how do you define significant? What if you're talking to an enterprise company and they look at what you do and they're like, you think this is significant? Or what if you are targeting a smaller company and they look at what you do and say like, wow, we're 5 years out from having those problems. So I think the words you use in an intro, especially when you use it in a question, needs to be very, very specific, because people are going to read that. They're going to get the sensation to actually answer that question in their head, regardless of whether they're interested. And so if it's offensive or if it's confusing, you've lost attention. Going into the Harvard Business Review, I think the only thing I'd say on that is like, you're totally right. You need to be careful with links, not only with how you're linking, If you'll notice, when you looked at the email, he had many words of that sentence linked, which I potentially think is a red flag for spam filters if you're linking large swaths of your email. But
Good point.
not only that, you made a good point, Austin, that like it distracts from the email. When you are trying to like quote Harvard Business Review, you're trying to build clout for you. You know, you're not trying to drive traffic to Harvard Business Review. So make it short and sweet. Show the clout, show the info, move on. The more you hang on that Harvard Business Review and having all the links there, the more you're going to do exactly what you said, Austin, which is kind of stop. It's a pattern interrupt, but for the wrong reasons. And all of a sudden they're like, oh, this stat on Harvard Business Review, I think I'll go check that out instead of reading this cold email, right? Finally, on the bullet point piece, the whole purpose of bullet points is to make a lot of information really digestible and well formatted. And I think what this does wrong is it kind of takes multiple sentences that I think if they would have done the work to just organize them well, it could have just been 1 to 2 short sentences. And instead, it actually makes the email look longer because it's bullet points that are big. So that's scary to read. That's probably why you only read the first bullet point, because you're like, oh, geez, like this one was a sentence. I've got 3 more left, right? I think another piece is you need to look at like common denominators with bullet points. We had a discussion, Austin, before we started this session about how many bullet points somebody should use. And we never answered it, but I would say regardless of how many you use, you want to get rid of common denominators. And I think in this, the whole thing is about communication. It could have been boiled down into kind of 1 core sentence talking about communication, but instead they kind of had, 4 bullet points talking about the same thing, but just from different angles. And so when it comes to bullet points, I would really focus on if you do use them, make them short, make them sweet, and make them digestible.
Yeah, and I think if you look at so you're right, the bullet points were intimidating. If you're going to have 4 or 5 bullet points, each one's got to be short. You've got to look at, say, because that's adding another line. And on mobile, now I read a lot of my email on desktop, but I think it's about a 50-50 split. I think if you look at it globally, I'm not sure. Maybe it might be 30-70 with the weight towards mobile now. I'm not sure. I haven't looked at where people are reading emails, but it would be interesting to see, whether you're on mobile or on desktop, it's still, you're adding lines and you're making that email more and more mentally intimidating, right? And so it definitely scared me off as a reader to read the list. And in my opinion, a good way to summarize this email is it's a marketing newsletter masquerading as a prospecting email. Or it might be backwards, right? It's a prospecting email that's trying not to be pushy, except in the wrong place, which is the call to action for the 15-minute call. And it's trying to provide like resources and value, but it's kind of like the socially awkward person at a party or something, where it's trying to do these things, but it does them in the wrong manner that actually hurts instead of helps. Like providing resources can be good for a prospect because a prospect doesn't necessarily know that they have the problem you solve or know it very well, right? At least that's what we find a lot in prospecting is prospects aren't, they know they have problems. A lot of problems they have, they live with until you've enlarged and one of the things you like to say is you've given context to a problem or you've explained why that problem matters. And prospects don't sit around all day thinking about why that problem matters. And so email can do that. It can educate and you can provide resources, but providing me the super long Harvard Business Review text link and then 3 more links down in the footer. Here, I'll pull it up really quick just so the folks at home can take a look. But like there is a lot of links and you can kind of see that this is trying to be helpful, but it does it in the wrong ways. And so it ends up feeling like a marketing newsletter with a bunch of different articles I could read with a 15-minute meeting ask in it. And so that's not going to convert very well. I like that it has problems and it's problem-centric and it attempts to educate. I just don't think it does those things very well. It's so close to being good. It really is. It's right on the cusp of greatness, but it just doesn't close the deal. It doesn't quite get across the finish line.
Yeah, I think to recap, like it's all about what you said, focus. I think they did well but not only with how they frame the problem and also with their CTA, just too much information, too many asks, too distracting. Like I say in a lot of these episodes, and I phrase it this way, like, even if they are interested, even if they are qualified and in market and ready to go, if you're expecting them to absorb all of this and then expecting them to like address 3 separate asks with a bunch of different links and options, you're purposefully kind of sabotaging the conversation that you want to start, in my opinion.
100%. All right, so let's go on to the rewrite here. And I just want people to see, for people that are watching this, this happens a lot when Grayson rewrites an email, and you can see his skill as a copywriter really shine here when you go from something like this. Like, look at how much screen this takes up from the title line. So it says original, and the rewrite will have a title line too. Look at how much screen it's taking up. And again, that's a format. Sometimes it's a content issue. You're writing too much, but there isn't a whole lot of writing here. Just look at how much 4 lines of, 5 lines if you count it, goes to a second line. How much 5 lines of bullets does to this email versus something like this where, here, I'll put it on a rewrite. Oh, whoops, scrolled a little too far. There we go, rewrite. It's like 1/3 to half the size. And I'm guessing it's going to convey a lot of the same message. So I'll let Grayson turn it over here, and he can walk us through his rewrite. There's also, note the difference in colors. I'm sure he'll talk about that too.
Cool. So let me just start out reading it. Hi, Austin. Nearly 1/3 of U.S. employees don't understand why changes happen within a company, which is why internal communication is essential to effective change management. When making significant company changes, leaders often struggle with employee resistance because of poor timing, communication, or support. You've likely experienced the challenges of managing organizational change. So I'm hoping to share a better way to support change at New Arcs with our cutting-edge communication solution. Would you be interested in learning more? What do you think?
Okay, great. There's one more thing that I didn't mention about the other email that I want to mention that you at least do here. There was absolutely 0 personalization. And I mean 0 attempts. Doesn't mention New Arcs. So you at least mentioned New Arcs. And I realize when we rewrite these, it would be, if you were writing it, you could really cheat on personalization because we have a bit of a dialogue and relationship outside the email. But I will say that there wasn't even firmographic stuff. And I mean, like, number of employees, and you could look at how many people are on my sales team, or even what my title is or function is. There wasn't anything in there that was contextual to me. And so I'm 1,050% sure actually that it was a mass email. This one at least has, the company name in it, a couple of things in there. And again, we try to play nice with our rewrites and not like bring in outside stuff. So I understand why it's written the way it is. First of all, there's more blue here. And for the people at home, we'll scroll up just so you know what blue is. Blue is ideal customer profile, like specific personalizations or assumptions to the persona you're writing to. And it's always good to have your blue and your yellow and your pink. So look for blue, yellow, and pink near each other. Those are how you tell good stories. Anyway, my first impression, first of all, much more concise. You've got 3 groups of text. It's like 6-7 lines, which for me as someone who is reading fast, it's going to help me. And this is how you have to storytell in cold email, is in idea blocks. Here's 1 line or 1 block of an idea, great. And that should move you to the next with a CTA. And I think you do a really good job of doing that here.
Yeah, just to explain my homework a little bit, I think what I found most interesting about the previous email was this, Harvard Business Review stat. I thought, he or she put that in there for a reason. So I'm going to assume that people care about it, and it's a pain. a third of US employees not understanding why change is happening within their own organization. If we're targeting leaders that manage change, which is the first question that the previous email had, I would want them to see this first. Because instead of qualifying and kind of accusing them by saying, like, are you managing change? I'm adding value in a stat that kind of asks that same question. Because if they are managing change, they should be interested in this. But that's not enough, which is why I frame it about the stat that Harvard Business Review provided, and then I immediately follow up with the future state, because it's not enough to simply say, like, nearly a third of U.S. employees don't understand why changes happen within a company. Okay, great. Like, how does that apply to me? What does that mean? How should I interpret this? You don't want your buyers to be thinking about what you're talking about. You want them to be like thinking about the topics behind it. You want them to be thinking about change management, not, what does it mean that 1/3 of US employees don't understand it? And so that's why I put kind of a future state phrase there, so that they have that context.
And
Why does
something you
it
said
matter?
last week, you don't just want them thinking about change management. You want them thinking about their change management, managing their changes,
Exactly.
right? You want the prospect thinking about their own problems.
Exactly. And so that's why I framed the intro in that way, because, again, I have limited information and I don't want to, add personalization that would be unfair. And so I took a bet and said, I think that this persona would likely find this stat interesting. So I'm going to get it up front so they'll see it in the intro. And then if they open it, they'll immediately be able to read why it matters to them. And then kind of moving into the rest of the email, I did have to add more light blue. Which is the assumptions you make. And I think, we've talked about this a little bit more in depth in a previous episode, but assumptions are good and assumptions are bad. It's all about how you use them, what types of assumptions you make. And so what I'm trying to do here is kind of like qualify through these people that I'm talking through, or that I'm talking to. If they just read that first line and they're still reading, they might be the right person for me. So I'm wanting to continue that momentum of continuity that lets them know I know what their life is about. So I make a bet. I make an assumption that says, when leaders are making, or like when companies are making significant changes, it's a struggle often for leaders to deal with employee resistance. It's a broad assumption that even if someone doesn't agree with that makes sense. It's logical, and it says, like, okay, you're right. When you make significant changes, not every employee is going to be happy about it. And then I follow up with more pain, because what I'm trying to do here is paint a picture. I say, here's a pain, here's why it matters. Here's what people like you do sometimes do, and here's the pain behind it. And then finally, in that third line, I'm wrapping up to offer that value exchange. I make a final assumption, because most leaders, if you're a director up and you haven't managed change, lucky, right? So I'm going ahead and saying, like, you've likely experienced the challenges of managing change, right? You're a leader. Of course you have. So here's what I'm hoping to offer you. I don't talk about my company until after I've presented what I'm hoping to offer to you.
Yeah, that's really great. So when I read this, so people, I and I this comes up with my team a lot too, is when we talk about writing cold emails and making assumptions. I mean, you already addressed there's good assumptions and bad assumptions. But I feel like people want to download some template or some cure-all or some silver bullet or something where they can just copy and paste it in and send it, and they know they'll get a pretty good response. And what people need to understand is, hey, you need to do one of two things. First off, you need to either you're either going to make an assumption based on, firmographic data or the industry segment or what their company is doing, that they're making a change that's similar to customers you've had, or they have a problem you solve. But there's probably some kind of indicator. And if there isn't, and the only reason you're reaching out is because you got the lead assigned to you in your CRM, then you're always going to be stuck in this, you're going to be stuck at the top email in mass emailing crazy stuff out that doesn't, that tries to shotgun out problems, right? So the next step you need to take is you either need to make assumptions about what's going on in the organization or actually find out by like going to different departments or doing more recon, having industry connections that are, mutual third-party connections to your prospects, so that might know what's going on in the organization, to get you more intel and more context into your email. Like there is a step above, this level of email with personalization and context. But if you don't have that data, which is not always possible to get, right? Sometimes there's an account you want to get into, you don't have connections, you don't know anybody, nobody will talk to you, all you've got is outside info, you're going to need to make assumptions. And making them in the right way is important, because without assumptions, you're going to be generic all the time. Without a calculated hypothesis into what's happening in their business, you're flying blind. And your copywriting in your email is going to show it. So that's why when you look at the blue with the yellow or the blue with the orange, you can see where you've made safe assumptions based on, like you said, if you're director or up, you've had a change management. If you haven't, you probably just have the title and your individual contributor. If you manage a group of people, there's change. I would say, even if you're like a manager level, not even director level. But yeah, a large organizational change, director level and up, you've managed something. There's been some kind of change you've had to manage. And you make some assumptions about what problems they could be facing if they're undergoing a change right now. I think we too often as salespeople try to paint people into a corner where they have to say yes in our email, where really you'd be better off like having a good conversation or making assumptions about problems they have and hearing back from them that no, that's not a problem they're having right now. We're really afraid to hear, hey, we're actually not having problems right now, and having people disqualify themselves to us sometimes.
Yeah, I completely agree. And kind of to your point, when it comes to templates, like I feel like the assumptions made is kind of where the money happens. I mean, I've done this for a lot of different industries and for a lot of different use cases, and there are common themes and common threads in messaging that you can find that works across different industries, different business models. CTAs, the open ask, that can be applied across business models. But the things that are hard, the reason why the whole personalization field exists is because people usually don't respond to just marketing jargon. There needs to be something relatable, and that's why you make an assumption or direct evidence, which is personalization, to try to build that relatability. And I think in a template, that is where the money happens. I would be focusing less on templates as a whole and focusing more on like, how can I make assumptions that my buyers agree with? Because if your buyers agree with them, they're reading them, right?
Yeah, more importantly, they want to talk to you.
Right.
If you've got the same, if your assumption is something they agree with, they either have experienced that problem or have that problem. And if you have somebody that knows they have a problem, the next step is to talk with them, meet with them, see if they're willing to go on a, in gap selling, Keenan talks about this, to qualify an opportunity, how do they know they have a problem? If they know they have a problem, are they willing to go on a journey with you to remediate that problem? That's not a direct quote, but Gap Selling, great book. That's how you can tell if a prospect is qualified. If they agree they have a problem, do they want to fix it? And if they want to fix it, are they willing to actually go on the journey that it's going to take? And we're way early in that process. So you just want, if you're making the right assumptions and people agree with your assumptions, you're checking that first box of, do they know they have a problem, or do they agree that it is a problem?
Yeah, I completely agree.
All right, I think we're right at the end here. So just want to give Grayson, if you have anything else to say. This was, I think the rewrite's great, very succinct, good assumptions.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, well, just thank you for everyone joining us today. Make sure to follow the SD Revolution social pages, or come join us, come visit our website, and you can join our community to get access to all of our content and our community networks. Finally, the only other update for this live session is we just launched our second video course. So our last one was focused on managers and leadership. This one is dedicated to SDRs and individual contributors, really talking about best practices and actionable tips for today's SDRs.
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah, connect with Grayson and I on LinkedIn. SDRevolution.com is the website, and SD Revolution also has its own LinkedIn page. I think there's some other social outlets as well. Just search for SD Revolution, and we'll see everyone back next week. Thank you all.
Thank you.